Here is exclusive video from Air 7 as the suspect, 29-year-old Eric Holder, is picked up by LAPD detectives at the sheriff's station in Lakewood. He was placed in an unmarked vehicle.
They went and shot up this family house. They wiped out his whole family. Baby mama, granny. Them is dead. Like, they went and did John's that same day. Because why would you go kill somebody like Nipsey and then leave your mama and them on the block in the 60s? You supposed to get them up out of there before you even went to scope the scenery.
We in the doorway. When Hussle pull up, we in the doorway. You gonna see me with a hoodie on, and I got a pistol on me. You gonna see one of the team members in the hoodie in the doorway with a pistol. That's protocol.
It's been 5 years since the streets of LA were rocked by the devastating news that Nipsey Hussle, a beloved figure and local legend, was tragically gunned down in front of his Marathon clothing store. The event shook not just Los Angeles, but the entire world, as videos of Nipsey being rushed to the hospital spread quickly across social media.
It's the dramatic last video of rapper Nipsey Hussle, gunned down in Los Angeles. Paramedics worked frantically to keep him alive.
Sadly, despite everyone's hopes, Nipsey was pronounced dead not long after. Fast forward to 2023, and justice was finally served when his killer, Eric Holder, was sentenced to 60 years in prison.
Back here at home, hip-hop star Nipsey Hussle was gunned down in 2019, and today, his killer, Eric Holder Jr., was sentenced to 60 years to life.
But the thing is, Holder wasn't the only one who faced consequences. His entire family apparently felt the ripple effects too. Recently, a video has been making waves on social media, featuring a woman from the rolling 60s neighborhood in LA who's got her ear to the streets. In the video, she talks about the intense retaliation that was carried out in the wake of Nipsey's murder. She claims Holder's family was wiped out in a series of revenge acts.
They went and shot up this family house. They wiped out his whole family. Baby mama, granny. Them is dead. Like, they went and did John's that same day.
According to her, Holder made a terrible mistake by killing one of the most respected and beloved figures in hip-hop, seemingly forgetting that his own family would be vulnerable to retaliation.
Because why would you go somebody like Nipsey and then leave your mama and them on the block in the 60s? You supposed to get them up out of there before you even went to scope the scenery.
Now, what's even crazier is that around the same time, Nipsey's brother Black Sam did an interview where he opened up about a range of topics, including Nipsey's life, their upbringing, and of course, the tragic day Nipsey was unalived. Toward the end of the interview, Sam shared some emotional memories of that fateful day in 2019. He recalled feeling hopeful as they rushed Nipsey to the hospital, but when his brother passed, his faith was completely shattered. It was like the Twilight Zone after that, Sam told Big Boy during the interview. Everything I believed in, my faith was shattered.
Just couldn't understand it, man. It's like the Twilight Zone after that. Everything I believed in, or my faith in, shattered.
Big Boy then asked Black Sam if he thought Nipsey's murder was as random as it had been portrayed. That's when Sam dropped some serious details about the usual security protocol that was in place whenever Nipsey visited the Marathon store. Sam explained that typically, when Nipsey showed up, someone would be standing in the doorway, armed and ready, watching over the scene. "You're gonna see me with a hoodie on and I got a pistol on me," he said. But on the day Nipsey was shot, something was off. There was no one in the doorway, which left Nipsey vulnerable.
We in the doorway. When Hussle pull up, we in the doorway. You gonna see me with a hoodie on, and I got a pistol on me. You gonna see one of the team members in the hoodie in the doorway with a pistol. That's protocol. Why the niggas in there didn't follow the protocol? I wasn't there. Why they didn't follow it? Maybe they just around helping the customer, doing some customer service. This is what I'm thinking. Transition into some legitimate, just selling clothes. But nobody was in the doorway.
Sam mentioned that Holder, before the shooting, walked up to Nipsey shirtless, almost like he was scoping out the area. He noticed there wasn't any security in the doorway, saw Nipsey was wearing shorts and didn't seem to be on guard, then left, only to return a few minutes later, this time wearing a red shirt. Sam pointed out that in their hood, no one wears red shirts, and you can't even buy one at the local liquor store. He speculated that Holder intentionally used the red shirt as a throw-off before sneaking through the alley and opening fire on Nipsey. To Sam, it was clear. This was no spur-of-the-moment shooting. It was premeditated.
From my understanding, old boy walked up with no shirt on first to check the scene, because he know what's going on in that parking lot. They say came back with a red shirt on, tiptoed through the alley, and went right and started shooting. So to me, that's premeditated. Number one, there's no red shirts in the hood. You can't buy no red shirt. No liquor store sell no red shirt.
After this interview, a lot of people started re-examining the Nipsey Hussle case. New information has surfaced suggesting that while Holder may have been the one to pull the trigger, there were others involved, possibly watching and even helping plan the attack. There's definitely a lot more to uncover in this tragic case, so let's dive in deeper. After the interview with Black Sam, a name that started resurfacing in conversations was Big U, mainly because of his past conflicts with Nipsey Hussle. According to the woman from Rolling 60s, who's been sharing her take on the situation, tensions between Nipsey and Big U began when Nipsey decided he wanted to break away from a deal with Big U.
Living in LA, I remember when Big U and Nip got into it because Nip didn't want to be under his label no more. Yeah, like basically trying to like extort Nip and had him in a ass deal. So when Nip finally got out of that deal, you know what I'm saying, he went about his way or whatever, and Big U didn't like that.
This move towards independence led to some bad blood, and many believe that this animosity could have played a role in Nipsey's murder. In the days following Nipsey's death, there was a lot of talk in LA about Big U being involved. People speculated that because of his influence in the neighborhood and his history with Nipsey, he might have had a hand in what went down.
When that Nipsey first popped off, when it first happened, everybody in LA thought Big U should. We all thought that. We all did. We thought it was Big U. When Nip died, because I remember Nip didn't want nothing to do with Big U. So when he got kicked or whatever, all LA was like, Big U did that.
This speaks to a bigger issue, a deep-rooted mistrust within communities when it comes to leadership figures and their motives. The woman in the video echoed these suspicions, wondering if the whole thing might have been an inside job. One of the biggest red flags for her was how there were no weapons present at the time of the shooting, even though they were in a known dangerous area. She suggested that either there was negligence on the part of those responsible for Nipsey's protection, or worse, that someone might have colluded with Holder.
LA kept saying like, bro, why nobody had no burners? Why nobody was shooting back? Why nobody was doing nothing? Like nobody shot back, nobody did nothing. And that is crazy to have no burners, right? When we looked at that, all of LA was just like, nah, that was an inside job. Cause there's no way in hell you got Nip in the parking lot on Slauson and Crenshaw, and there's no burners.
She also backed up what Black Sam said about Holder coming back multiple times before the shooting and how no one seemed to notice anything was wrong. In her words, it's kind of like being on the block and seeing the same car pass by more than once. You know something's up and you stay on alert. Yet when Holder came back, no one around Nipsey seemed to pick up on the fact that something was off. It was almost like people were just too relaxed, despite the high-risk environment.
The first time he came, should have recognized him, and then seeing him coming back, they should have been like, oh, this is the second time. That's like when a car going around your block. You're like, this car just went around the block like twice. Then when it come again, that's the same car.
The woman expressed serious doubts about the official story of Nipsey's murder, saying it wasn't just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. She believed it pointed to bigger issues, involving multiple people, not just Holder. Drawing from her own experience with a loved one's murder, she emphasized that these things are rarely the work of one person alone. In her eyes, while Holder might have been the one to pull the trigger, many others were involved in planning and overseeing the events that led up to Nipsey's death.
See, it was one who pulled the trigger, but it was actually two, but at the same time, it was like 10 niggas involved. So that's the same thing with like Nip, bro. I felt like shit. It wasn't just shit, he was just a shooter, bro. It was more than that. Like, it was more than involved. He was just a shooter.
She also touched on what happened to Holder's family after the shooting. According to her, after Holder killed Nipsey, his entire family was wiped out in a series of revenge attacks. She speculated that if Big U had really orchestrated the whole thing, Holder might have spoken out by now, especially after losing so many of his own people.
They went and shot up this family house. They wiped out his whole family. Baby mama, granny. Them is dead. Like, they went and did John's that same day. That people's is dead behind that. If Big U actually put him up to a after he killed Nipsey, his whole family got wiped out within hours. They were dead. So therefore, if it was me, ain't no way Big U could have kept me quiet after that, because I did you a favor or I did whatever the and you couldn't even keep my family safe. So
But at the same time, she admitted she wasn't sure if Holder was even smart enough to pull off something like this on his own. That's why a lot of people still think Big U could be involved. No matter how many times Big U denies having anything to do with Nipsey's death, there are still doubts in people's minds, especially now with this new wave of information coming to light. Everyone knows about the friction between Nipsey and Big U, and the fact that Nipsey wanted out of his deal didn't sit well with Big U. There were multiple occasions where the two of them had serious disagreements, times when Big U wanted things to go one way, but Nipsey wanted to take a different path. So people are left wondering if there's more to this story. Was Holder really acting alone, or was there a bigger plan in motion? So, on March 31st, 2019, the tragic event that claimed Nipsey Hussle's life took place while Eric Holder was on a date with a woman who, without realizing it, would end up being his getaway driver. Holder approached Nipsey in front of the Marathon clothing store, which is near the corner of Slauson Avenue and Crenshaw Boulevard. The two men exchanged a few words before Holder walked away, only to return minutes later with two handguns and start shooting in the middle of the parking lot. Nipsey was killed, and two other men were injured. The whole attack was caught on camera, so there was no doubt about Holder being the shooter when the trial started last year. However, when the trial kicked off, Holder's defense attorney, Aaron Jansen, tried a different approach. Instead of arguing for murder, Jansen aimed for a manslaughter conviction. His main argument was that Holder wasn't thinking clearly after Nipsey supposedly hinted that there might be paperwork on him, a term used to suggest someone might have cooperated with the police. Both Eric and Nipsey were members of the Rolling 60s, a well-known Crip street gang, and being labeled a snitch in that world is one of the most serious accusations you can face. Jansen claimed that for Holder, having Nipsey, someone with his status, call him out like that, especially in front of other gang members, was a huge deal. This wasn't just a friendly chat between two guys catching up, Jansen explained during his closing argument. Holder took it seriously. He knew the consequences of being called a snitch in that environment. Jansen was making the case that the insult struck a nerve in Holder, triggering him to act out of rage. It had been speculated that the root cause of the shooting was that Nipsey had called Holder a snitch. In gang culture, especially for someone trying to make a name for themselves, being branded as a snitch is one of the worst things that can happen. The insult can follow you around, damage your reputation, and make it nearly impossible to be trusted by others. Holder had been trying to make a name for himself as a rapper too, calling himself Shitty Cuz, and at one point, Nipsey had even signed him to his label as an up-and-coming artist. But after the snitch comment, Holder must have felt his chances of ever getting ahead or being accepted in the community were over. Despite what his lawyer was saying, the prosecution had a different theory. Deputy District Attorney John McKinney argued that the real motive behind the shooting wasn't just about being called a snitch. He believed Holder was driven by jealousy. Nipsey had already become a huge success in the music industry, and his 2018 album Victory Lap was even nominated for a Grammy. Meanwhile, Holder, who had started rapping under the name Fly Mac, wasn't getting anywhere close to that level of recognition. A key witness for the prosecution, a man named Douglas, took it a step further. He said Holder's whole claim, that the mention of paperwork made him fear for his life, was outdated thinking. Douglas argued that in modern LA gang culture, people don't really care about snitching the way they used to. There are so many snitches walking around today, Douglas said. That's a myth. You can leave the Rollin' 60s and no one's going to do anything to you. Maybe in the 80s that was different, but this is 2022. It's not the same. When the snitching argument didn't seem to be sticking, Jansen tried to make another case. Holder was suffering from severe mental illness. He read a letter from Holder's father which said that Eric had been diagnosed with auditory schizophrenia when he was just 19. According to his father, Holder often heard voices in his head, which made him paranoid and act erratically. Jansen described a recent incident where Holder, just 3 weeks before the shooting, had a manic episode and threw a heavy weight through a window because he was convinced someone was going to kill him. When that argument didn't seem to sway the jury either, Jansen made one final plea by showing a picture of the metal staples in Holder's head. Holder had been attacked in jail during the trial when another inmate slashed him with a razor. Jansen used this as evidence to argue that Holder was already facing a dangerous future behind bars. He asked the court to give Holder a sentence of 28 years to life instead of the maximum of 60 years, pointing out that life in prison for someone who killed Nipsey, an icon with a huge following, would be filled with extreme danger.
Nipsey Hussle's alleged killer was attacked on his way to court. Eric Holder's attorney tells TMZ that he was attacked by two people while in a holding cell. Holder needed 3 staples after being cut with what's believed to be a razor.
Jansen pleaded with the court to take into account just how brutal Eric Holder's life would be in state prison. "It's going to be a short, brutal life," Jansen said. "He's already had multiple death threats, he's been beaten up, and he's in isolation. Every time the sheriffs move him, they have to lock down the whole floor just to keep him safe." There were several people, including Nipsey's fans and those in the gang community, who openly said that if they had the chance, they would take Holder's life themselves to avenge Nipsey. But with a 60-year prison sentence looming, it was clear Holder would face that danger behind bars. That argument, however, didn't sway the court. TMZ reported that Holder was arrested in the LA suburb of Bellflower around 12:50 p.m. in the 9000 block of Artesia Boulevard. LAPD arrived on the scene to positively identify him, while the Los Angeles Times revealed that the woman who had driven Holder away from the scene had turned herself in. Her name wasn't made public at first, but she claimed she had no idea that Holder had just killed Nipsey when she picked him up. According to her, she had driven Holder to the Marathon clothing store that day and waited in an alley while he went inside. He didn't tell her why he was going there, and when he came back, he didn't mention a word about what had just happened. Once the video of Nipsey's shooting hit the internet, people on social media quickly identified the shooter as Eric Holder, a wannabe rapper who went by the street names Shitey Cuz and Fly Mac. His photos started circulating, and the neck tattoo, he had made it clear that he was the man in the footage. As more info came out, it became known that Holder had a bit of a criminal history. In 2009, charges of domestic violence and battery were dismissed against him, and he had other minor offenses like driving without a license in 2011. But the bigger charges came in 2012 when he was caught with a loaded firearm and a concealed weapon. He ended up pleading guilty to the first charge, which landed him 3 years of probation and 180 days in LA County Jail. By 2015, he had a probation violation hearing, but even with all that on his record, nothing compared to what he was facing now. In the end, Holder was sentenced to 60 years to life in prison. He was convicted of first-degree murder for Nipsey's death and also found guilty of 2 counts of attempted voluntary manslaughter for the other men he injured in the shooting. Those 2 men survived, but the charges stuck. As the sentence was read, Holder, dressed in his orange jail jumpsuit, just stared straight ahead without showing any emotion.
Count 1 alone, it would be 50 years to life. The total sentence would be 60 years to life in prison. Court should note that the other enhancements found.
The harsh reality is that Holder took the life of a man who had become a pillar in his community. Nipsey wasn't just a rapper. He was a leader, an entrepreneur, and someone who deeply cared about giving back. In recent years, he'd invested in a massive project called Destination Crenshaw, a 3-mile-long outdoor art and culture experience that celebrated Black Los Angeles. On top of that, Nipsey was a key investor in Vector 90, a professional co-working space in the Crenshaw district. It was more than just an office space. It was a bridge between Silicon Valley and the inner city, and it offered STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math classes for local youth. Nipsey had big plans to open more of these spaces in other cities like Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and underserved communities all across the country. In an interview with Forbes, Nipsey talked about how in his younger days, he had been influenced by ignorance and the self-destructive narratives that were pushed in music during his generation. He was determined to change that for the next generation, building something positive and long-lasting. In a November interview with Fox 11, Nipsey explained that his goal was to leave a legacy for his children, one that would last long after he was gone. "We're playing the long game. We don't want the money to stop when we go or when we can't work anymore. We want it to outlive us, to be generational." After his death, hundreds of people from Los Angeles flocked to the scene of the shooting, wanting to pay their respects to Nipsey. The crowd grew so large that it led to a stampede, injuring multiple people as the community came together in shock and sadness. Though Nipsey's life was tragically cut short, his legacy continues to thrive through his work and the impact he left on the community he loved so much.